Welcome to Pub and Porch, Applied Stoicism in Modern Life, hosted by Adam Piercy and Mick Mulroy. Welcome back to Pub and Porch, Applied Stoicism, for our part 2 in our review of the Odyssey movie. For those of you listening, this might be instantaneous, i.e. it comes right after the part 1. For Mick and I, it's a week later because our schedules only allow us to record about an hour a day when we do it on Sundays. And so to kick us off today, and something that Mick and I were talking about, the episode that just ended, the part 1 that just ended, we were discussing in the Odyssey the situation with Odysseus and Polyphemus in the Cyclops giant that he meets in the cave with his men. And there was an interesting find we had. I don't know, Mick, if you want me to tell that, or do you want to do that?
Well, I want to tell it because you deserve credit for it. When I watched the Odyssey, I guess I heard what I thought I would have heard, right? So I thought he said, at the end while sailing away, my name isn't no man or nobody. It's Odysseus, the sacker of cities, yada, yada. I thought it was an excellent film. So this isn't like, piling on whoever is
right.
His detractors. I thought it was an excellent film. I just don't know how you'd leave that out, because that was like the key moment that shifted everything, right? So by announcing himself, his name, he essentially told the Cyclops that he wasn't, the grammatic trick was he was saying his name was nobody or whatever. So when he yelled out to the other Cyclopses, he said, who hurt you? And he said, nobody. And they're like, well, then shut up.
Yeah.
So the deception that he used, the guile, if you will, and we could talk about it separately from all the moral lessons of the Cyclops cave. But the guile, he just threw away by his hubris, right?
Yeah.
And then what did the Cyclops do? Told his dad. Who's his dad? Poseidon. Poseidonus, as the Greeks said. Right? Yeah. And if you're sailing home, that's the one god you really don't want to piss off. So It was like a super, like everything after that, right, a lot of it was related to Poseidon screwing with him because he basically blinded his son. So, and you picked that up in the movie. So we had the debate at the end of the last episode, and I could have swore he did that because I couldn't imagine leaving it out. But then you promptly pointed out, as other people have, that he didn't. So there you go. Well done, Mr. Adam.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, what's interesting is there is a choice made in the film that Odysseus turns around and shoots him in the eye a second time, like with the bow and arrow, which I think kind of goes to show that there's maybe a little bit of arrogance there, but it's very different. And we were talking about this last week, right? Like there was a little bit of pick and choose that threw me a bit. Because they have a long conversation as well, actually, in the tale. Polyphemus is not like this nonverbal sort of noise-making giant, right? He is he speaks. I mean, it's it's always funny in this story. It's like in Star Trek, right? Like they go to another planet and everybody speaks English, but at the same time, right? There is this conversation that happens with between Polyphemus and the Cyclops that they encounter in the cave and Odysseus. But it's an interesting choice to make. I think he still had a little bit of it in there with the arrow, but I think there's a conversation there. Now I will say, right, and rereading back through, and I should say I'll give it another call out, reading back through Emily Wilson's version of the Odyssey, which is the version that Christopher Nolan read that led to him wanting to make the film. There is like Polyphemus, he is a giant. He looks on the humans as ants, right? So they interact, but he's not like it's not like Polyphemus is super nice and Odysseus is a horrible person to him. It's kind of a mixed bag. Odysseus tries to be nice and Polyphemus is like, well,
but don't the Greeks start the malfeasance in the sense that they go in and start eating his sheep?
Yeah, that's definitely how it is. It doesn't really so interestingly, and this is a really important part to say, in this part of the myth tale, Odysseus is actually telling the story of Polyphemus, his meeting with Polyphemus, to Alcinous, who is the king of, I can't remember exactly, but he's in a royal court, like he's washed up on somebody's shore.
Oh
And so
yeah,
he's
the
the
end.
one,
Yeah,
right? And so he's the one telling the story. And so he's actually telling the story to this court before he gets back on the sea again. And the way he says it, and this is an interesting part about it, is the way he says it is like, well, we did eat some stuff, but we were going to welcome him home. And so it's like this, it's kind of a mixed bag, right? So, but the way it is in the film, right? I think rightly so, is like they enter this guy's home and then they kind of just hang out and take some of his stuff. So the one part that's definitely right about it is they wake him up and they poke him in the eye with a big stick,
right, right.
which is horrible. I should say, seeing it in IMAX, and I was telling you about this, the sound was so loud when he screamed,
Mm-hmm.
when Polyphemus screams out after getting stabbed in the eye. It was so loud that I could see, and because it was very bright, because it was lit with firelight, and you could see everybody in the audience covering their ears, and I was like, it was a very interesting. I had a very different experience in that film because the sound, it was so loud in that theater. So like, and I was wearing earplugs and it was still
No
loud for me.
kidding.
So, yeah, so that's our Polyphemus. Was there anything else we should add on that one, Mick? I mean, you should
I think we
wrap
covered a
us up
lot of
there.
it, but part of it, yeah, Polyphemus looked at the humans as, like you said,
Tiny.
ants. But
Yeah,
it was a violation just of common courtesy to go into his house and start using his stuff, right?
yeah,
Even if you said, hey, we're going to welcome him home. I mean, with somebody, if you went home today or you're at home, but if you came home after work and somebody's already like, you know, cooking a pizza and, hey, Adam, welcome home. And you're like, who the hell are you? Right. I mean,
yeah.
it doesn't make it better. So
No,
the idea that, they didn't start the problem, I think, is in the story itself.
right.
That's part of it, right? So
Yeah,
almost, I mean, you could look at almost everything that happens, and I know we look at everything from the lens of a Stoic, but and see the early Stoics kind of like, okay, a moral story on that would be courage, when to use it, when not to use it, when it's for hubris, when it's for good, you know, um, if wisdom, right? Wisdom isn't just being clever, like tricking the beast, so to speak, or using the Trojan horse, for example.
yeah,
It's using wisdom for what purpose? Uh,
yeah,
Obviously, temperance, or what I like to refer to as self discipline, is throughout, right? So Circe's and the pigs, kind of like controlling your appetite, or Helios and the cattle, or even you know what's her name again?
Cersei.
Calypso,
Oh,
Calypso,
Calypso.
Calypso,
Yeah,
right. Having
yeah,
the kind of moral fortitude to leave and realize that, although she's a goddess and beautiful and everything's perfect,
yeah,
that's not who you are. You're married and have kids,
yeah.
right?
So
So
there's
it's a
only,
lot of it is self discipline. A lot of the stories today is really self discipline.
I think so. Yeah. So the only other thing I will comment on, and this is in the book, and we'll talk about it again in when we wrap this up. But I think the other thing about it is that in the book it's very clear through the conversation, right, that Polyphemus he doesn't agree with Zeus, because Poseidon and Zeus aren't always friends, right? So
Yeah.
in the book, because Odysseus is telling the story, he's like, I waited in his home, in hopes that he would give us gifts, meaning he would take care of us. And Polyphemus says to him, you're kind of a fool, because I don't follow Zeus. It's weird to assume that someone's going to treat you well when you shack up in their home
Yeah, the
like that.
Xenia stuff. There's an
Yeah, like
interesting. There's actually a version of that in Afghanistan. It's called
oh,
Pashtun Wali.
oh,
Actually,
really? Oh, I did
yeah,
not know
yeah.
that.
It's Pashtun's one of the tribes, and a fighting tribe, I might add. But they have
Yeah,
this. They have this core belief that you are obligated to offer a stranger help. It's
yeah,
called Pashtun Wali. So it happens. I bring it up not specific to Afghanistan, but I think this is something that exists in cultures throughout the world.
Well, I think in a time like that where we don't have GPS and there's no Uber Eats, right? Like I think there was just a cultural disposition towards the caring of strangers. The only way people could get around was through the care of strangers in many cases, right? Especially
Yeah,
in the sparsely populated islands of Greece at the time.
totally.
So if we move our story forward then, right, in terms of the timeline in the movie, right, I mean there's flashbacks with Calypso all throughout this, but that's a bit of a different thing, because, and so we'll have to touch on that I think second, but I mean after the encounter with Polyphemus, we have the encounter with Circe, right, which is
Yes.
an encounter where the and again it's in the book, so it's not like we
A
can spoil
nymph.
it.
Do you want to explain what a nymph is?
Yeah, so a nymph is a nymph. Nymphs are kind of like demigods. They are usually born of a mixture of the gods or demigods together, and so nymphs serve the gods, and a lot of the nymphs have royal lineage. So Circe is actually a daughter of Helios, the sun god, and she and other nymphs, including Calypso, who's a nymph, who we're going to talk about a little bit. They have essentially royal or god lineage, so they usually have some special abilities, but they also nymphs are also usually tied to physical places or physical things. So there's like in the Iliad, there's Boagrius, which is a river, and it's like a river nymph. And so it's kind of the same. So Circe's a nymph, and she also sometimes she's described as a witch because she essentially enhances her magic with um, herbs and like local wildlife, right? To get that kind of going. And actually, that is in the book, right? And you can see this in the movie, I think, when they get up there, because Circe's island is populated by all these animals, right? That she's essentially summoned over time, and sometimes we learn that some of them aren't just they weren't originally animals either. Some of them used to be men, as it were. So Mick, what was your first take on that section of the film? Because it's a little bit shorter than it is in the book, but I'll leave that for now.
Well, I mentioned, it's a lot of it is self discipline, right? So, and I think picking pigs, although they might get a bad rap, as what they turned the men into.
Yeah.
Pretty shocking scene, I would say, in the movie.
Yeah, it was a
Deliberately
horror
so.
movie.
Yeah. Yeah, intentionally so, right? So,
Yeah,
I think that is ultimately the moral of the story is that it's gluttony, right? So it's the appetite,
yeah,
in the sense that you should be able to control yourself. Now, Odysseus does essentially,
yeah,
and is not turned into a pig, and then he has to spend all the time that came afterwards, like a year, something like a year in the
yeah.
book.
He chooses to stay with Circe for a year. She beds him, and that's how it's described in the book.
Yeah, I mean, it's been pointed out. I think I mentioned last time. A lot of the vets I know are like, so let me get this right. It took 10 years to get back, and 8 of them were shacking up with some,
Yes, yes,
nymph or, um,
yeah,
in Calypso's case, she's a goddess, right? Um, yeah, eh, yeah. Anyway, I'll leave that as is. But he eventually talks
yeah,
to her and gets her to, turn his men back to men and
yeah,
move on. But I think the point primarily, and I think a lot of the stories that you hear, certainly early on in human history, are meant to tell a moral story by telling a story, whether it's um, obviously the Odyssey, but even like Plato's Republic, if you think of the allegory of the cave
yeah,
or the
yeah,
Gyges ring, um, certainly there's uh, those kind of stories in Christianity. Different stories of Jesus that are supposed to teach something. And I imagine also, and I've read, of course, the Quran, and I think it's just common. It's the way humans are used to learning things. instead of, especially at the time, it was an oral and it was a story. It was an orally told story. So you had to both make it real, which means very descriptive, but also, and I'm like this, I don't know if you are, but like I learn things better if it's in the form of a story.
Yeah.
Because I just remember the story. Like I love listening to people's stories. I'm not great at small talk about like stupid stuff, but when somebody starts telling me a story, it can even be somewhat boring. It's just interesting to me, right? So, but I think I pointed out not to talk about what works for me, but I think that's what works for a lot of people. And I think that's why a lot of these early human stories are really about the actual person, and the moral value comes from the position they're in and what they chose. Even if they chose the wrong way, right? It's still, you still learn a lesson. And I think that's the primary thing here in the Circe stories of the pigs, is that.
Yeah, I think, first off, I think the scenes are done very well. This was another one where I think the scene was done very well. They omitted a part of this original story, which was kind of an interesting one, because the whole reason that Odysseus knows not to eat any of her food is because Hermes comes to him, the winged messenger, and he says, look, you can't have any of her food. You must exercise restraint. And that's the only way that this is going to work, because Hermes and Circe are connected in their past. And so I understand, like, and this, I'm sure if we had been shooting this, or if we had been filming this 20 years ago, we would have had the same conversation about Troy, right? The decisions about filmmakers when making movies about these myths, right? They're forced to make a decision, right? Do we keep all the supernatural elements where Hermes literally shows up with winged sandals and, his staff? Or do we is it sort of an allegory type thing where it's like, Hermes came to me in a dream or whatever it is, right? But I think it was done very well. The one thing we know is that Circe. The one thing that I think is very true about Circe in the story, in the film and the story together, is that she has been wronged in the past. In fact, she's kind of banished to this island she's on, Aiaia.
That's right.
And the reason why that's really important is because she is very wary of outsiders, right? She's been attacked before. She's been isolated on this land for some time, and strangers showing up who are armed are obviously a huge risk to her. She's an isolated being, nymph or not. Nymphs aren't like gods where they're immortal. And nymphs are not immortal. And so, I think she showed this really interesting, I can't remember the actress name, and I should have looked that up because she did a great job. She was able to sort of balance this out where she's vulnerable, but she's also, she's not going to let that vulnerability allow her to be harmed, right? And so she takes actions into her own hands and does the pig situation.
They almost kind of portray it as she's turning them into pigs as self-defense.
Yes.
Like she's concerned something's going to happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because the thing is, right, is like she's surrounded by, I think in the book it may be as high as 20 men, but I can't remember. But it's like you've got a dozen of these soldiers. They are armed to the teeth. They are armored, right? And she's on her own, even with her magic, right? The thing is, she sort of has earth magic. Like I think I find a lot of similarities between Circe and like Rhiannon, the Welsh witch type of character, where she's using the earth, but it's like she has to touch things. They have to eat something. She can't just like wave a magic finger and all of a sudden changes. So it's self-defense in her own way. So she's not killing them. And I've always felt in her mind that she's not poisoning them. She's changing them into something
she could have done that easier. She could have
exactly, but she's not doing that. So what's interesting, though, I think, is there's a distinct non-romantic connection between Odysseus and Circe. That's not in the film. And I don't know that it needed to be there. I'm not saying that it did, but it does remove the fact that there's like a whole other part of this, right? Like
in the actual story, there was no romantic.
No, in the movie.
Right, I'm talking in the actual poem.
In the actual story, yeah, he's there for a year.
Yeah.
He's there for a year, and they bed, and then because this is a part of a larger set of myths, they actually Circe has at least one son by Odysseus, which is
That's
Telegonus.
what I thought. Yeah, and he comes back and kills him later, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, but at the same time, like, I think the scene was done very well, and I really loved it. There was people would think of it as a small scene, but I really loved the scene when, so Odysseus has shown up, the men are pigs. He's trying to do the olive branch with her, leaving his weapons outside, but he comes in and he's still got the dagger in his boot. And she says, "You don't need that dagger in your boot." Right. And I think in one way it shows that she's supernatural, like she knows stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's a really interesting play there because he has a choice, right? And this is a choice that he makes in the book as well. He has a choice. He can go in swords blazing, right? Or he can not do that. And he chooses not to do that in the story. He doesn't eat anything, but he chooses not to do that in the story. And he puts the dagger on the table, right? And when he lets go of the dagger, I'm probably putting a lot more weight on it, but it's like because my brain I think was trying to find a parallel between the two stories. He puts the dagger on the table, and he lets it go, and it's kind of like, okay, everything's literally on the table now. You know what I mean? Like literally and metaphorically on the table. And I think that there's some power to that. Now the movie goes by it like that, right? And it's kind of like, but that's a really important thing because he apologizes to her for like offense, right? And he kind of does that in the book too. But then they leave out like she takes him upstairs. And then there's Barry White playing.
Maybe they're trying to, like, I don't know, improve his image.
Yeah.
I mean, if you would have put everything in this, people probably would have liked him so little.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and there's a theme I wanted to talk about that as we went through today. But yeah, you're right.
Even though I remember reading it as a young person, I liked him. I mean, I guess, and I read, the original or whichever version, I don't remember actually, but it had everything. And I still was super rooting for him to get home. But I don't know, maybe modern, not that was long ago, but if you would have just showed him like constantly doing the wrong thing, shacking up with her. And
yeah,
I don't know. By the end, you'd probably like, oh, somebody just kill this dude.
Yeah. And I think,
and he was the only one left right at the end.
So he is the only one left at the end.
People and
troops. Yeah, he is the only one left at the end.
Yeah.
And so, so it's funny, right? Because I was telling you this, I think offline when we did our first episode in this two-parter, where I grew up reading the version by T.E. Shaw, which is a pen name for T.E. Lawrence, i.e. Lawrence of Arabia. And it's very glorified, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the language. Emily's language is far different, I would say. And when I say far different, I mean like 99% of the story is the same, but the choice of words is very different. It sounds like Zeus is making an appearance for us.
I know, right? That was like
that's like a
movie version of a thunder. Yeah,
I'll put that in the show notes. Special appearance by Zeus.
Okay.
And so what I think I'm trying to get at is that it really does come down to interpretation. I felt like the story in many ways made him very, very heroic and good. And when you read the book, especially the Emily Wilson version, and I did feel this in the old version as well, it felt like the allegory they were trying to tell you was actually this man's journey from arrogant, war-winning hero to realization of his mortality and the fact that he probably made a few mistakes along the way.
As we all do.
Yes, absolutely.
Which makes him very human, which is the kind of hero you really connect with. Because if it's like the Superman version of the superhero, then he's like perfect. At least the Superman I remember.
For sure.
Right? Where he's like, he doesn't even cuss. He doesn't, I mean, he's like just perfect. I don't know if the new version is like that, but that's the way Superman was when I was coming up. So he's kind of like much more relatable.
In the newest version, he's kind of like that. He's like, I'm punk rock, and he tells Lois, and Lois is like, you listen to, and they name this fake band, but they're like, you listen to this band that's like my grandmother listens to that band, and he's like, oh, I guess. So, okay, so they have time with Circe. It's very short, and I think it proves the point of what it needs. Now, the one thing Circe does, and this is where we're going to get into one of the parts that I think is key to Odysseus realizing what's really going on around him and how long it's going to take to get home, is she guides him, gives him guidance on how to get to the underworld so that he can speak to the blind seer Tiresias and learn about what he has to do next if he's going to make it home alive. So, do you want to set the scene for us on that one? I've done a lot of talking, so why don't you set the scene for us on that one?
Well, actually, you can talk about Tiresias. What I want to talk about the underworld was his mother, meeting his mother, who he didn't know who had died.
Yeah.
There's a very compelling part of that interaction. Obviously, losing a parent is very traumatic for any kid, no matter what your age is. But he can't actually hug her. He tries,
right,
but she's simply not there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I think as a story about loss, it's very poignant in the sense that they exist. Did they exist in an underworld? If you not underworld, but or another world, if you believe that,
yeah,
I certainly hope there is one, but I don't know. Or is it in your mind?
Yeah,
you see what I mean? That's a super compelling point. And the biggest part of the underworld, I'll leave you to the Tiresias, but is Achilles, the interaction with Achilles, because I think it goes straight to one of the main points that Marcus Aurelius would talk about a lot, which is that, I mean, at the end of the day, everybody's essentially forgotten and fame is fleeting, and to pursue it is somewhat a fool's errand.
Yeah.
Right. Even though, ironically, Marcus Aurelius then becomes one of the most famous persons in human history, but potentially because he didn't want to be, Yeah. That's why meditations is so fascinating. But going back to Achilles, who is, I'm sure everybody listening knows, is the most famous warrior in history.
Yeah.
And he's basically given, I think his mother's actually given the opportunity to choose, he's going to have a short life and a famous one, or a long life and
right.
Be irrelevant.
You mean Achilles' mother, Thetis?
Achilles' mother, yeah.
That's
right. I think it's her that makes the choice, right? I mean, he's a baby. And she dips him in the.
Yeah, because Peleus, his father, right, he's kind of wins her, or like he gets her hand, right? So he doesn't get a choice; he just gets to have Thetis.
Right, but so he either chooses or his mother chooses for him to be the famous person who lives a short life, which seems. Right. I was just watching Michael Collins last night, who was assassinated yesterday, one of the liberators of Ireland, died at 31. Right? I mean, a lot of very, very famous people, Jesus Christ, for example. And maybe part of that is that they were frozen in time at the height of their whatever they did. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And Achilles was too, and he killed in the Battle of Troy. But he tells Odysseus, I would rather be the servant to the poorest man on earth than a hero or a ruler over the dead.
Yeah.
And I think we mentioned the last time, it's very counter to the culture of ancient Greece, which was all like glory. I mean, Achilles actually represented what they felt. They wanted to live and potentially die a glorious death.
Yeah.
Because it would give them immortality, not physically, but philosophically, maybe. You see what I mean? And then Achilles, who embodies this concept, as soon as he gets to talk to him, is like, it's all bullshit, man. Like, I'd rather just be living than go down dying because I'm famous. You see what I mean? I think that's the biggest part, and it's a very Stoic concept that, fame is fleeting and not something to be pursued.
Yeah. I'm going to read a quote from this because I had it ready for today. So this is from Book 11, The Dead of the Odyssey. Starts at line 482. And he's speaking to Achilles. He says, "But no one's luck was ever better than yours, nor ever will be. In your life, we Greeks respected you as we do gods, and now that you are here, you have great power among the dead. Achilles, you should not be bitter at your death. But he, Achilles, replied, Odysseus, you must not comfort me for death. I would prefer to be a workman hired by a poor man on a peasant farm than rule as king of all the dead. Very fitting moment.
Yes.
Very fitting moment. Now, the thing about the Achilles situation in the book is that there is no Achilles in the film. There is, however, a character named Sinon, who actually isn't in the original Odyssey. He's in
it's a character. It's a real character.
It's a real character. Yeah, he's in a different story. That's and they're all the same time period. I was jokingly telling my uncle this yesterday. The Iliad, the Odyssey, and the myths around that. It's kind of like the Avengers, right? You have individual stories like the Odyssey, and then you have like the Iliad, where all the heroes get together and fight each other, right? Which so it's their Marvel universe in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. So the thing about Achilles is Achilles. He's really there to teach Odysseus this lesson, right? He's so proud, he's so glory, he's so whatever. And it turns out that death really sucks, right? For Achilles. And Sinon he doesn't say this in the film, but he does have this moment of like you essentially damned me by sending me on this war, by bringing me with you, right? And I think there's a responsibility that Sinon is trying to tell Odysseus, you are responsible for this. I was home free, or I might not have had to go, but you instead brought me along, and look what happened. And then he says, and you lied to me, which was this idea of not telling Sinon that the men were inside the horse statue that they made, so that the myth, it could be believed, right? And this is one of the key things that I think is very important to Odysseus's description, even of himself in the book, when he's even telling his own part of the tale. We think of Odysseus as glory. We think of him as this hero. We think of him as this like lamenting his home, and he wants to get home, and he never wavers from that. But in reality, especially with the translations, and even translations from earlier times before Emily Wilson, Odysseus is described as the liar, the trickster, the sacker of cities, right? These aren't really positive traits, right? These aren't really positive traits. Athena loves him because she loves wisdom and intelligence and the use of it. But the thing is Odysseus uses his wisdom to trick Achilles into joining the war, actually. It's Odysseus who figures out the deception that gets Achilles to reveal himself. Because they're going to I think they're going to sacrifice Achilles' wife. And Achilles jumps. He's dressed as a woman in a big veil, and he jumps out, and he has his sword ready to kill Odysseus. So Odysseus says, "Wait, if you come with us, it's fine." And Achilles comes with him. And so I think it's one of those telling moments in the story where Odysseus is learning a lot about the realities of life. That, yep, you're super smart and you can be clever and do all of these deceits and trickery and whatnot, but at the end of the day, you'll be in Hades with everybody else, right?
Yep. Totally true. We all end up in the same place, man.
We do. So after this, they see Tiresias. Tiresias in the film, I really enjoyed that. Blind Tiresias with the veil over his eyes, telling them where they have to go. And the one thing they have to do before they get to Calypso, the one thing they have to do is they have to pass through two trials, which is Charybdis, the whirlpool, and Scylla, which is like a big monster, who actually is supposed to live near the town of Scylla in Italy, which is sort of how the myth becomes real. So there was some stuff about the whirlpool and Scylla that you were going to talk about. So why don't you take us away on that topic?
Yeah. So to keep everybody up to speed on this part of the story, so Odysseus has to decide. There's a whirlpool and there's a six-headed monster. If you were to try to go through the whirlpool, chances of the entire ship being destroyed are high.
Yeah.
If you instead go closer to the six-headed monster, you're going to lose men, probably six of them, because it's got six heads.
Yeah.
But you're not going to lose the whole ship. So it's kind of like that. You remember that old philosophical allegory where it's a trolley
problem.
Yeah, trolley problems. Which, I mean, ultimately you have to make a decision, one or the other. It doesn't seem to be that complicated to me. Maybe it's the military dude in me. It's It's not that I want to lose any men, but if you're like lose 6 of your men, lose all your men. I mean, that is a decision that does happen.
Yeah.
Maybe not as dramatic as, well, actually, yeah, as dramatic as that. I mean, there's all sorts of stories I could tell you where that is, that comes out. There's actually there's a famous sniper story, Vietnam. Obviously, not my story.
Right.
Might be kind of relevant here. It's kind of an interesting story, but it's referred to as I won't even tell you what it's referred to because it gives it away. But anyway, so Marines, Vietnam, they're coming back in to patrol. That's when the enemy hits you because you're kind of like not paying attention. You think you're already back through enemy lines. You're not, but you're close enough that you're like, oh, thank God. And so they hit a guy. The guy goes down, and then all of the rest of them run into the friendly lines.
Yeah.
So the guy's out there, and the platoon commander says, "I know what they're doing. They're shooting a guy and they're leaving him alive, yelling and screaming. So everybody else will want to go out there, and they'll just pick us out one at a time." Very common, unfortunately. Yeah. So he's yelling down the line, "Stay in your place, stay in your place, stay in your place." And this guy keeps screaming, and the sniper then hits him again, but it's, not a fatal thing. It's just to cause pain. So finally, one of the sergeants runs out to get the guy. And he comes back, and of course, they're shooting at both of them, trying to kill him. They do manage to hit the guy that was originally injured and kill him. But they get back. It's the sergeant and this, let's say, lance corporal.
Yeah.
And the platoon commander screaming at the sergeant and, tells him, like, you disobeyed direct orders. It's similar, right? You're trying to save the good of your men for...
That's right.
And the famous part of the story, and I believe it's true, this was told to me right after 9/11, actually.
Yeah.
He's in his bunker, or his version of a bunker, writing home, because, the officers always write to the family of the fallen.
That's right.
And he's got this sergeant at attention. He's yelling at him for doing it. And he said, "Well, I mean, you're the last one that he would have talked to. What was his last words?" And the guy said, "I knew you'd come."
Right.
Right. So it's kind of the ethos of the Marine Corps. So, but it uses it. You can use it against us, right? You can use it against America, right? Yeah. I'm not saying we're the only ones like that, but I just take the recent example of the down pilot in Iran.
Yeah.
It's like one guy, and they launched JSOC to get him, basically, right? So maybe I'm getting a little off track here, but the point is that it's a similar conundrum, especially the one in Iran, right? That's recent, and people will remember that. We launched hundreds and hundreds of dudes, rightfully, because it's our ethos, to save one.
Right.
So you can use it against folks. So he had to make this decision. Do I sacrifice the few for the many, etc.? And he chose, obviously, to sacrifice the few. But he kind of like hedged and hawed and kind of gave it up to them, and if I recall correctly. But I think the moral story is it is the trolley.
It is
the trolley analogy.
Yeah, it is. And this was one of the parts of the film that really fell flat for me, because in the original story, Odysseus says, they're going right towards the whirlpool, and he says, "Nope, we're going through the pass." He says, "We're going through the pass." Odysseus clearly knows that they're going to die if they try to do the whirlpool. And he said he does not tell them. He doesn't tell his second in command, Eurylochus, that he's going to take them through a pass that will take 6 men. But he does say, "No, we're going through the pass," right? In the movie, he doesn't tell them anything, and he leaves it up to them. And I think it's this idea of some kind of free will message that they're trying to say. But ultimately, I think me as a leader, not that I'm ever in this situation, but I think me as a leader, like, if we have to make a tough call, like, I'm going to make the call. It seemed weird that he was trying to push the responsibility on them. And he's like, "Well, if we had told you, you wouldn't have done it." And it's like, well, but if you had told them exactly what you knew, which is we all die or it's only 6 of us die, I'm sure people would have gone for the pass as well. And so that one kind of fell flat for me. which again, this is one of those things with the film that I struggle with, where it has so many of the right elements and such good acting and so many great scenes, but it was like, you're making it so that, like, in some ways, I think in some ways it's also really bad because it's very deceitful. He's not telling them the truth. He's just saying, you know, well, we could go either way, right? Which way are we going to go? And it's like, I would have expected him to just kind of make the call, because that's the way it is in the book. And the other thing too is, in the book he struggles with this very deeply. He's struggling because he's already lost 2 ships, right? He's down to 1 ship. So he's lost 2 ships and he has to lose 6 men, and he's like, oh, this was a really tough decision. But in the film, they do Scylla, which is the monster that takes the 6 men. It's very faceless, which was an interesting choice for me. But I think this is one of the few times where I agree with Eurylochus, and very few people like him. He's sort of the annoying second in command, where it's like, I really wish it's his brother-in-law. It's actually Odysseus' brother-in-law is Eurylochus, his second in command. But at some point in the book, he's like, Eurylochus talks back to him about something at some point in the story, and Odysseus, he says something out loud like, I could have smacked him right there. But anyways, yeah, so they go through Scylla. So yeah, it's the trolley problem. It's an interesting one. So yeah, so they get through this. They get to the land of Helios's cows, right?
Yes.
And to keep us moving on this, they get to the land of Helios's cows, and Odysseus tells them flat, we cannot land on that. And they go, why not? Look at all the whatever. And he's like, I was told if you eat any of these cows, Helios will be angry and all of you will die. And they go, okay, well, we'll just eat our own provisions. And then they're stuck. And they're stuck on this island. And they do end up doing it. And I thought there was this great line where he says, like, did you think he wouldn't hear you if you ate quietly enough? Right. And I think that's an interesting one because it goes back to what you were saying about the the temperance, the self-control, because they just couldn't control it any longer. And they finally killed Helios's favored cattle. And then there you go. And it was over. And then they get on the boat and then they're gone. And then he washes up on the shores of Ogygia, which is where Calypso lives.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Calypso. We talked a little bit about that already, because we talked about the choice of actresses. She's awesome.
Yes. Now, something I would love to hear you talk about again, because you were kind of talking about it in the first episode. Odysseus is really struggling with this. He's lost everything. He's washed up on the shores. And the way it's talked about in the book and in the film, right? You were saying that it really feels like he's got PTSD, right?
Yes.
And he's struggling through this return to civilization. He sees a woman. He hasn't seen a woman in God knows how long, right? And he is struggling and crying out in his sleep and things like that.
Yeah, on the PTSD thing, which I think was one of the main points that Nolan was trying to get across, that might not be the same as it was in the story, although it was there. But, people talk a lot more about that today. And PTSD is now so broad that I'm talking about combat-related, conflict-related PTSD.
Yeah.
And actually, I think I brought it up last time. There's a lady named Sam Akbar. She's a doctor, who's also a classicist, who was just on classical thinking.
Yeah.
I listened to her. She's great.
Anya Leonard.
With Anya Leonard, yeah.
Who I went to high school with her, by the way. I don't know if I told you that.
Yeah, well, she's been a lot of Stoic stuff that I've been on.
Yeah, I was one of her first episode. I was one of her first interviews on modern Stoicism. I was one of her first interviews. Yeah, about 5 years ago. But we went to high school together.
Oh, right on. So I bring her up because even though she's talking about the Odyssey, her literary specialty is people who have got PTSD from conflicts, so Syria, Gaza. If they make their way to the UK, as she said, she's generally going to talk to them. But it's an important part of the story. When I was watching the movie, it just dawned on me that a lot of PTSD is essentially shame.
Yeah.
And it's either real or imagined, right? I'm not even saying that everybody who has PTSD has a reason to have shame, but we tend to impose it on ourselves. Like, why did I
Right.
make it back? Why did all my friends die? Why did many of my friends die? And then we tend to impose it on ourselves, even though obviously, in most cases, you had nothing to do with your friend dying, and you
Yeah.
simply live because of flat out luck. And I can tell you that's generally the case.
Yeah.
Right. For some reason, I think other veterans would back me up on this. It seems like the people that died were some of the most squared away soldiers, like
Yeah.
capability wise.
Yeah.
It really had their death had nothing to do with, in most cases, a mistake they made. Although we all make mistakes,
Sure.
but it's a self-imposed shame, And then there's real shame because you did something you knew wasn't right. Right.
Yeah.
It's called war crimes, or you've witnessed it, or you witness stuff that just happens in war. That had, people die in war. It's probably hasn't changed since the sacking of Troy to modern conflicts right now. If you're fighting in and amongst civilians get killed. They just do. And you have an absolute obligation to do everything to mitigate it, and obviously not do it deliberately. But unfortunately, you see this in combat. I mean, it's one of the reasons why me and my business partner, and in this case, my charity partner, have an NGO that's in child soldier. Because the longer our wars went on, the younger the people that were fighting got.
Start running out.
Walk around the battlefield and you'd see all these dead kids that were carrying AKs, right? So whether you had anything to do with it, it is a form, and I'm not a psychologist, so if I'm off, the psychologist should correct me, but that's how I view it. And I think I've never I never viewed the story of the Trojan horse as something to be ashamed of.
Right.
Because, deceit is like important in combat.
Yeah.
It's like the people that can get the element of surprise, which often comes with deceit, hence surprise, win. So I always viewed it like that's super smart. And if they're dumb enough to drag, because it's a hubris on the parts of the Trojans, right?
Yeah.
They wanted the trophy. If they would have just said, screw it, leave it on the beach.
Yeah.
Right. But I do think, because what Nolan depicts is what happened after they come out of the horse.
Yeah, that's right.
That's the point I'm getting to. Maybe a long way to get to it, but that's what he was trying to depict, and I think he did a really good job. And although I think every soldier, hence after the Odyssey, that's familiar with the story, views himself in a way as Odysseus.
Yeah,
they just do. It's a process of going, the hesitation, being there, what happens there, and the process of coming home, whether it's metaphorical or in this case a mythological. It's a similar process. And I think I mentioned last time, so I don't want to be too repetitive, but in the old days, like World War II, you'd take a long time to come home.
Yeah.
Get back to Canada, get back to the US. You're with your buddies for weeks and weeks before you get back, then you're out process and all this. And then in the global war on terror, it was like constant, at least from the special operations side. You were in Baghdad, you were in, you name it, Jalalabad, in Afghanistan, and then within days you were back in society.
Yeah.
Driving a minivan, picking your kids up from soccer. So it was very surreal in that sense. And it was very disassociative, I think.
Sure.
But anyway, I think that's part of the story, both the poem and the movie, that I think really came through, especially in the movie, is this idea of dealing with trauma that you endure in conflict.
Yeah. And I really do tend to agree with that, right? Especially the scenes when he comes back and he's still kind of struggling. They changed the ending into a much happier ending in the film, but I mean, it's a film and it's also an interpretation. And that threw me a little bit because he has a very happy ending. In the book, he has to leave because he must go and
replenish his stocks.
Yeah, but he also has to go into the West, and he must, and it's in the book as well. He has to go and give thanks for all the people who, essentially, that he got killed from some of his actions along the way. But but also he goes off by himself in a way when in the book, for example, he doesn't leave with Penelope. She stays behind, and then he comes back, and there's a whole other story that's not even in the Odyssey. But yeah, so let's do some closing and we'll be done. But I think, for me, I think as I was saying over it, I think there's so many parts of the film that's well done. I was disappointed ultimately with some of the thematic elements. And I realized later two things. One, and I think I said this to you, I kind of wish I didn't know the myth before I saw the film, right? Because the problem is you've got a 3,000-year-old story being compared with a film in IMAX that's 3 hours long. It's much different. The second part of it, though, is I think I felt like I had hoped that this was going to be a film that would still contain that, extreme hubris example. Because in the world where we have people, we have trillionaires, and we have, all these people who think they're just the greatest things since sliced bread, it feels like, there is a lesson to be learned about, like, everyone has the opportunity to be, essentially, fate will in some point intervene, right? And that's what happens with Odysseus, going right back to that encounter with Polyphemus when he shows his arrogance and says, "I'm so and so," and then he's damned to 10-year journey home. But at the same time, I do think the film was very well done in many other ways, and the acting was incredible in so many points.
Yeah.
Do you have any closing thoughts for yourself, Mick? And then we'll wrap up for today.
Well, I do hope that this, because it's almost been a cultural phenomenon, how big this movie was. And like we said when we started, there's been people who complain about, cultural war stuff, the historical accuracy. I know a lot of the people in our space, being Stoicism, had some issues with that.
Yeah.
I get their issues because, just like Seneca said, you're kind of missing the point of the Odyssey. You're focusing.
I think so. Yeah, I get that.
But I think it's all good. I know, so maybe it's just a super optimistic way of looking at it, but it gets people talking about it. Right?
Yeah. Well, exactly.
I think, it gets people talking about it. And if you're a historian, you're going to care that the boat they use is really a Viking boat, right? Right. I mean, yes. We don't, because we're not historians. Right. You know what I mean? So,
and it doesn't really help the story to discuss that part.
Yeah, no, I know. But I mean, my point is,
I know.
Like the churn, even if it was not something you agree with, I think is actually a positive, because it gets people talking about a core bedrock story of humanity.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So even if some of this stuff, the talk was trivia is in the eye of the beholder.
Yep.
That's my point. And obviously, I think what Seneca thinks is you should focus on the philosophical points. But that's because me and you do a philosophical podcast. But anyway, my point is, I hope we do more. I hope Hollywood does more of this. And it's not because you can't come up with an original story. No, of course you come up with an original story. Look at Star Wars, right? Which is also based on a lot of myths. Joseph Campbell's myth. We can go down that story too. But you get my point. And I think it's important to connect it to our history.
Yeah.
Right. And this really did that. So hats off to Christopher Nolan.
Yeah.
Guy's phenomenal director. And I think we owe him a debt of gratitude for making this movie.
Absolutely. I do agree with that. The discussions around this have been really, really interesting. And I think something we kind of need to talk about in a way, because this is a story much older than everyone else, but it parallels modern day so easily. Well, we'll leave it there. So that's the end of our two-parter on the movie and the myth altogether. So we'd love to hear from you. Should like, subscribe, info@pubandporch.com. Send us your thoughts. We'd love to hear those as we go into this next year of the podcast. But until next time, cheers, Mick.
Slash, Adam. Thank you for listening to the Pub and Porch podcast. If you'd like to find out more about the podcast or its host, head over to pubandporch.com, and you can listen to all our episodes on Spotify, Apple, or whichever platform you prefer. And if you'd like to help out with the podcast, you can find us on Patreon. Drop us an email if you have a comment on any past episode, you have a suggestion for future episodes, or you have an essay on an important topic for Stoicism, send it to us, and then we can be reached at info@pubandporch.com. Until next time, Pub and Porch out.
Today's music is provided by Heath Cantu from epidemicsound.com.